So the customer's resource is customer converter. I meant this is something, you know, JAX-B, Java architecture for XML binding, is just a wrapper which is able to serialize everything to XML. It wraps the JPA entity and is able to serialize it to XML or to JSON in that case. So this was RESTful services, I guess in 5 minutes. You got it? So nice URLs, get, post, convention. You can address methods, address resources. And I was able to kill with this technologies, just with this hack, yeah, some SOAP projects, yeah, which is a good thing. So J2E patterns. So there were many J2E patterns, and many architects were proud of it because there were, I don't know, 20 patterns or so, and yeah, they were just solution for a problem from the spec, not a common problem actually. And if you go, yeah, the first idea was that if you look at the abstract of the original J2E core pattern, you see the intention was to replace the database with object-oriented database, flat files, LDAP, and so forth. But I never was in such a project. So in Germany, at least, we stick with one database. So it is rarely will be replaced from Oracle to DB2 or from DB2 to Informix or something like this. And the idea is here to make the relational principle superfluous. So they want to replace relational database with object-oriented database. It actually never happened. So from my point of view, patterns have something with probability, you know. If you should not abstract from everything because you will went crazy, so it's not possible. So, and in my opinion, for instance, it is enough to be dependent from JPA, Java Persistence API, because it abstracts already from Hibernate, Toplink, JPOX, and everything else. So you are then dependent on object relational mapper. Yeah? Proof of concept, Ruby on Rails. So they do not have 500 layers, and it works somehow. Okay? So Groovy, the same story. You know, not Groovy, Grails. Sorry, heard about Grails? They just expose domain objects to the UI. So it was highest possible decoupling. Yeah, the architects love it. The developers hate it. So you had interfaces, value objects, factories, and stuff like this. Yeah, if every abstraction causes additional effort, and you will eventually end up with something like xdoc.mda code generators or something crazy like this. So JP 1.0 introduced the entity manager, and the entity manager is nothing else than a generic DAO. If you have an entity manager, you have methods like persist, merge, find, create, query. It was actually domain store pattern. We'll see it later from J2E. So if you really like to have a DAO, I can show you how to build it with EGB3. It's no problem. You can do it. You have one interface with a little bit generic stuff, create, find, update, and list, for instance, find by named query. And with this single DAO deployed once, yeah, you can do whatever you want. You can create every possible entity from the world. So if you really like it, do it. The problem is this DAO implementation is almost empty. It's not able to delegate to the entity manager. So I don't know whether it is worth to do it. Yeah? So and how to use it? So you can. There's just a unit test. You can just invoke your beans, and what I just did, find by name query, is a little bit complicated because you have to know the query, and then I just have a kind of fluent interface. It's a new buzzword. It does mean nothing than readable code. Yeah. So, and with name, what this is just parameters which I pass, and parameters converts the parameters to a hash map. So that is, I used it in some projects, yeah, and it worked. So, but in other projects we just inherit from a DAO, which was previously a crazy idea, right? But why not? You can inject to abstract classes. The entity manager is backed up by the spec, so there's no problem. So you can inherit from the query capability. The problem with that, I have to discuss with the architects about this topic, because they say, okay, your EGB is not a DAO. It's like, yes, you're right, but this is a pragmatic approach. So testing is really easy. What you can do, you can say, okay, I have one persistence XML in the mainstream, and another persistence XML for testing. You need to do that because this persistence XML relies on JTA, Java Transaction API, and the other one has to use JDBC directly. This is the difference between both. Okay, so we will need 2 persistent XMLs, or one with 2 persistent units, which is not very good, because then you will lose conventions. You have to specify it everywhere. I use production persistence unit and not test. So DTOs, data transfer objects. The first flaw is the name, data transfer objects. They weren't objects, they were structures. So something like data transfer structure should be, because there was no behavior, just getters and setters, right? And some attributes. And the idea was actually to minimize the remote communication, because there was a problem with remote entity beans. And this was the initial introduction of DTOs. And what I see now, people try, to convert the Hibernate and JPA objects, the entities, to DTOs. And I say, fine, but if they are identical, there should be something wrong, because why to replicate the same code? And developers start to make a difference, changing the naming convention, something like this, and this is your beginning of the end. And I'm often asked, could you provide a generator for us to generate those DTO objects from entities? Is even worse. If you are able to generate and DTOs from entities, you do not have decoupling, because every chance you have to fire up the generator, And then some bin utils from Apache, or you can use reflection to copy properties. Bin util.copy properties is even worse, because it's not runtime safe, there are some tricks, but why not just to say, I expose my well-written domain object to the UI? What's wrong with that? And fortunately, there is something like Theme, which does that, and Grace and Ruby on Rails. It works in some cases. So it is not very suited for SOA, which is a buzzword, service-oriented architecture. That basically means nothing for a developer, but everything for a manager, for instance. Yeah? So DTO was suited for data transfer between layers. So it is not needed, except you have to access, for instance, stored procedures, legacy host, something KICS or IMS databases, MQ series. You need DTOs. But there's a very natural use of DTOs. I think it's no more needed just to use DTOs to decouple of layers, decouple from yourself. Yeah, you can decouple from, I don't know, from your clients or from a service, but not inside your application. So domain store, this is the origin UML diagram from, I think, JDD08 or so. There's a huge pattern called domain store to store object-oriented entities. I just copied it from the web. And if you look at this, it's nothing else than the implementation of Entity Manager. It is exactly the same. Some others, naming changes about create query, you see it, is delete all, there is no delete all, just remove. But what you have here is the persist map. And what is an state manager, which is a very important thing of an entity manager, the huge benefit of entity manager is a transactional cache. So it caches the object inside the transaction. But domain store died as well, because we have entity manager. You can call the entity manager domain store if you like, but why to do this, This is the origin UML diagram. So is that almost identical to JPA's entity manager. Entity Manager is already a best practice, and I recommend you not to start with Hibernate, but start with JPA. We had in one project problem with Hibernate in deep inheritance hierarchies and relations. We were able to switch to top link without changing the code. So it was a huge benefit. So it's, in case possible, just use JPA. This is, by the way, also the recommendation from Gavin King, and this is the guy behind Hibernate, so it should be right? So, do GSF really suck? Okay, in Germany, there is many people love GSF, some not, and there is another framework called Wicked. I have to say, so what you can do with GSF with a tool is, so you could new Visual Web GSF page, for instance. You can draw the pages, and this is actually the remedy. From my perspective, GSF only works with tooling. And there are NetBeans is free, and Oracle JDeveloper is free, and Eclipse JBoss Tools is called, I think, or JBoss Studio or something like this. Without Visual Designer, you can throw away GSF, so it's a lot of work. And you have XML again,